Breaking news.
Breaking news.
We make money when you watch the news.
So our only goal is to
Try to keep you
watch. We, the media, want you
afraid and
angry at one another. We want to stir up trouble.
we do that with
Stories promoting
fear and outrage.
So every night, this is what we do. Plus, we have some snazzy graphics for you with all the bells and whistles, so we can convince you that every story is urgent.
Even if it isn't true,
Because
it helps make sure that
our ratings are higher than
breaking news.
breaking news.
We make money when you watch the news.
So our only goal is to
Try to keep
you watching. We, the media, want you
afraid and
angry at one another. We want to stir up trouble.
we do that
The
with
stories promoting.
fear and outrage.
So every night, this is what we do. Plus, we have some snazzy graphics for you with all the bells and whistles, so we can convince you that every story is urgent.
Even if it isn't true,
Because
it helps make sure that
use them as a symbol more than anything else. The establishment media calls everything even when things aren't even. You know, if sports reporters operated in the same way the news reporters do these days, it would be laughable. They say, all right, well, the Cowboys and the Giants played last night, and the Cowboys say they won, and the Giants say they won. No, but who won? There was a score. And in this case, it happened to be the Cowboys. That's what you got to report. But unfortunately, whenever you turn to CNN, they say the Republicans say this and the Democrats say that. And I keep yelling into my TV set, who cares what they say? Tell me what actually happened. And there are real facts. You know, people like to say, well, it's all opinion. That's not true. So unfortunately, nearly 70% of this country thought that Saddam Hussein had personally attacked us on 9/11 when we went to war with Iraq. There was an objective fact that the establishment media failed to get through to the American people, which is that Saddam Hussein had not attacked us. That is not an opinion, that's a fact. And oftentimes there's an enormous deference to the government, to the Pentagon. If you say on television, hey, I don't believe the Pentagon, they'll look at you like you got three eyes. What? That's the Pentagon! I'm like, are you guys crazy? The job of the government, the media is to challenge the government. Does the Pentagon lie? Of course it lies. Every single story we've been told, from Jessica Lynch to Pat Tillman, to, you know, the drone strikes, to even the Bin Laden killing. The first story that comes out is almost invariably a fiction. Part of the reason is they know that's what 90% pay attention to, the first story. And they don't see the correction several weeks later when they say, oh, by the way, Bin Laden was not hiding behind his wife, he did not have a weapon, and we just kind of executed him, right? So I think the news in this country is fundamentally broken. I think there is a way to fix it, and it's for the news to actually challenge the government, as they are supposed to do, to be the fourth estate, to do it aggressively against Republicans and Democrats, and actually bring facts to their audience.
new hoax. By the way, this program has always taken the coronavirus seriously, and we've never called the virus a hoax.
I feel like the more I learn about this, the less there is to worry about.
I was about to say the same thing. Let me tell you something. This virus should be compared to the flu because at worst case scenario, it could be the flu.
So all the talk about coronavirus being so much more deadly doesn't reflect reality. Without a vaccine, the flu would be far more deadly.
This is yet another attempt to impeach the president. And sadly, it seems they care very little for any of the destruction they are leaving in their wake.
We don't have immunity to this virus. It's a new virus. It's a pandemic strain of a virus we haven't seen before.
You know, it's critical we know who has this. We must test for the virus in order to stop the spread of it.
We are facing an incredibly contagious and dangerous virus that is moving across the world from one hotspot to another.
We can laugh at it, but nothing to laugh at here. By the way, this program has always taken the coronavirus seriously, and we've never called the virus a hoax. It's like, oh, let's bludgeon Trump with this new hoax.
I'm not afraid of the coronavirus, and no one else should be that afraid either.
I am responsible for transmitting accurate messaging and information.
Now, I was pretty calm before all this, but then I got a little less calm when people told me to stay calm.
The heat is boiling over.
Democrats and their media minions are even trying to blame President Trump for the global coronavirus.
Anything to attack President Trump. It's the Trump virus. What are you talking about?
You know,
Ebola.
He's imported Ebola into America.
I look at Ebola as a medical terrorist.
There's no reason to panic at all. There's tons of hyperbole and speculation, none of which is helpful at all.
The entire problem we're having is due to panic, not the virus.
Ebola fear is spreading across the nation.
It's scary.
This Ebola crisis and this Ebola scare.
Do you think America could be overwhelmed with Ebola?
Absolutely.
Are we freaking out too much? Most people who have it have just mild symptoms.
Correct.
They're just sitting at home eating soup.
They have contained this thing. Let's everybody get about your business.
It's a disaster, and there's panic all over the country.
The president needs more help, and the public's worried that the government can't handle the Ebola crisis.
Watch the Democrats, watch the media. You start to feel like they're rooting for coronavirus to spread. If you want Trump to fail, then you're scum. Because if Trump fails, people die. The panic isn't about the disease. The panic is about the leadership.
The president said that this disease wouldn't make it here. Well, then it did. And then when it got here, it wasn't going to spread. Well, now it has.
I think very few people trust our government as being competent. And it's all really starts at the top. It starts with Obama.
I think the president has been projecting calm. He's been very cool.
Do I want my president running around screaming like, we're all gonna die? No, I love that he was like, we're gonna be okay. Are we all just panicking about this? Should we just chill out and not worry about it?
I'm just sick of a government that I'm paying for telling me not to worry and just trust them.
I think the President of the United States, by his lackadaisical attitude, is responsible if there is any hysteria.
There is no need to panic like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer want you to do.
Anyone who is exacerbating the unease that the American people feel, shame on them, reject them.
This is so insane, and I'm so angry now, and I'm blaming it on the president.
Those morons at the CDC, those morons in the White House.
We are taking this very seriously at the highest levels of government.
I don't know how reassuring that is, that the highest levels of government are taking this really seriously.
You think this is far worse than the government is telling us?
Either they're lying, Sean, or they're grossly incompetent.
Obama's incompetency, his administration's incompetency, is really shining bright in this one.
The level of derangement is off the charts.
This is yet another attempt to impeach the president.
It's like the Russia hoax. It's like the Ukrainian hoax. This is another hoax.
Sowing fear, panic, distrust. I was watching Anthony Fauci
deal
this
with-
weekend. I felt like he was a political hack.
Tony Fauci, one of the heroes of the battle
Anthony
against
Fauci,
AIDS.
absolutely.
Tony Fauci, terrific.
Ebola response coordinator Ron Klain.
Not a health professional. Look at the people who our taxpayer dollars are already paying actual physicians whose jobs you might think it would be.
Vice President Pence is an inspired choice to lead this effort. It could be a month from now, we're not even talking about coronavirus.
We all love golf. There are times to play and there are times that you can't play, and it sends the wrong signal.
A bit of golf for the president this morning. Not much Critical race theory isn't
To the critical race theory narrative.
Critical race theory in this discussion. A guy who was billed as
That's right. CRT, like a lot.
It's absolutely astonishing how critical race theory has pervaded every
critical race theory training in federal agencies. It's the stuff that claims all.
Such as critical race theory, things that have nothing to do with math. So Governor just
condemn critical race theory in our kids' classrooms. Our next guest is
denounce critical race theory. Critical race theory is critical racism.
teaching critical race theory nearly
and racist critical race theory. The left has commenting about critical race theory, about mass.
Someone else who doesn't like critical race theory is, can you guess? Yeah, you guessed it.
But critical race theory asserts that the world in America is divided into a racial caste system, whites on the top, blacks on the bottom, but they have no idea what to do with Asian Americans, because Asian Americans are a minority. You know, they have the
Critical race theory is critical racism theory. It is bigotry. It is racism.
Until he renounces the racist and divisive principles of critical race theory.
We have had a group of change.
Governments, not the federal government. We certainly shouldn't be stepping in with critical race theory. Look, we should be celebrating diversity. Critical race theory doesn't celebrate diversity, it weaponizes it. That's bad for America, and it
Happening in our schools and our military and our government is both simpler and easier to recognize than that. It's not critical race theory. It's racism. Not neo-racism or reverse racism. Those are meaningless terms. It is race hate. It is peddled by the people in charge in the hope that it will make them more powerful. That's all it is.
Not a hill you want to die on. Critical race theory? My goodness, this country's against this by like 3-1.
Which is pretty much going to be teaching kids how to hate each other, how to dislike each other. That's pretty much, I don't care what you say, it's pretty much what it's going to all come down to. You're going to deliberately teach kids, this white kid right here got it better than you because he white? You're going to personally tell a white kid, oh, the black people are all down and suppressed. How do I have 2 medical degrees if I'm sitting here oppressed? How do I get, first of all, time up. We only got 5 minutes now, 5 minutes. 2 medical degrees, no mom, no dad in the house, work my way through college, sat there and hustle my butt off to get through college. You gonna tell me?
Arising from institutional racism and white supremacy in our schools.
What will that message gain us? What type of inspiration are we expecting people to get from this, from critical race theory?
The social justice standards are a roadmap for anti-bias education at every stage of kindergarten through 8th grade instruction.
Are our kids, are they half oppressor, half victim? How does that work?
And when they come home, who do they see? Do they see their mom and their dad? Or do they see an oppressor and the oppressed?
Developmentally, we know they can be activists, but we must build their capacity for seeing injustice first.
And do they see me as the person who is losing out on all of this because I'm black and the system has been stacked against me?
all schools are rooted in white supremacy. Racism is really systematized. So it's in the air we breathe, it's in the water we drink, it is truly all around us.
Because of our skin color, now we're different people than the people that are raising them, the people who love.
I mean, this is from last year. I didn't know it. Right now, white students are the minority in U.S. public schools. And I remember thinking to myself, yep, that probably explains why Republicans are freaking out right now about accurate history being taught in schools. Because really, how could we whitewash it any more than it's being whitewashed right now? And then I came across this, and I thought I would share. So in 2002, Charlotte had to desegregate their schools. Yep, 2002. And when they did that, some researchers took a look at the kids that were resegregated with black students.
Sure. First of all, on the issue of critical race theory, etc., I'll obviously have to get much smarter on whatever the theory is. But I do think it's important, actually, for those of us in uniform to be open-minded and be widely read. And the United States Military Academy is a university. And it is important that we train and we understand. And I want to understand white rage, and I'm white, and I want to understand it. So what is it that caused thousands of people to assault this building and try to overturn the Constitution of the United States of America? What caused that? I want to find that out. I want to maintain an open mind here, and I do want to analyze it. It's important that we understand that because our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Guardians, they come from the American people. So it is important that the leaders now and in the future do understand it. I've read Mao Zedong. I've read Karl Marx. I've read Lenin. That doesn't make me a communist. So what is wrong with understanding, having some situational understanding about the country for which we are here to defend? And I personally find it offensive that we are accusing the United States military, our general officers, our commissioned, non-commissioned officers of being, quote, woke or something else because we're studying some theories that are out there. That was started at Harvard Law School years ago, and it proposed that there were laws in the United States, antebellum laws prior to the Civil War, that led to a power differential with African Americans that were 3/4 of a human being when this country was formed. And then we had a Civil War and Emancipation Proclamation to change it. And we brought it up to the Civil Rights Act in 1964. It took another 100 years to change that. So look it, I do want to know, and I respect your service, and you and I are both Green Berets, but I want to know, and it matters to our military and the discipline and cohesion of this military. And I thank you for the opportunity to make a comment on that.
The verbiage, critical race theory, is, let me talk about critical race theory. Across this entire country, you've had states like Texas, Idaho, and others pass laws banning the teaching of critical race theory. You have a band of Karens who have launched assaults against school boards, saying, don't teach our children critical race theory. Here's the reality of it, ladies and gentlemen. K through 12 education does not teach critical race theory. As a matter of fact, colleges, undergrad, they don't even teach critical race theory. It's considered to be an advanced theoretical framework. Graduate level classes typically will teach critical race theory if you're taking particular courses. Now, why are they saying they are banning critical race theory? Don't fall for the okie dokie. See, I'm from Glenwood Road. I peep game. They're simply running game on Republicans, moderates, independents, and trying to run game on those on the left. But it doesn't work here. We are immune to game. CRT, critical race theory, has been around since the 70s. It's not a new concept. It is a derivative of the legal scholarship concept, which examined racism as it correlates to systems, institutions, policies, not just people. In other words, if you eliminated or decreased the number of individual racist people in America, you would still have to contend with the fact that you have racist policies and racist norms connected to institutions. Let me give you another example. The U.S. Constitution called me 3/5 of a person. That's called an institutional racist norm. The Declaration of Independence, another founding document of our nation, called Native Americans savages. That's an institutional racist norm. Those institutions continue to permeate today. Critical race theory, ladies and gentlemen, not taught in K through 12 education. There is no school teacher who has ever taught this in K through 12 education. As a matter of fact, when you went to high school, did you learn critical race theory? Of course not. This is a fabricated pretext in order to create a context to stop critical thinking, not critical theory. That's what this is all about. The bills that have been proposed and the bills that have been passed do not contain the verbiage critical race theory. Isn't that something? They don't have the verbiage that says CRT. They do say race, racism, racial, and even sexism. Those words are inside of these bills. The fabricated pretext is critical race theory to create the context to serve an agenda that says, let's stop thinking critically about what white racist lawmakers did in this country. That's what this is about. Let me give you another example of how Republicans have played this game before. Remember the weapons of mass destruction? Remember that? Once again, a fabricated pretext in order to create a context to serve their agenda.
Imprisoned or otherwise eliminated from participating in the electoral process. The result is an absence of checks and balances in Russia and the decision of one man to launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of of Ukraine. Iraq, anyway. 75.
One would think this cornucopia of media companies would be delivering a cornucopia of diverse news, entertainment, information, and ideas. After all, these media companies are peppered across the nation from coast to coast. Unfortunately, as widespread as they are, almost all of them are owned by basically 6 multinational corporations, what's known as conglomerates.
A conglomerate involves a situation in which one corporation will own a number of other corporations in different areas of economic activity, but they will all be controlled by the head of the conglomerate.
These conglomerates are Comcast, Disney, Sony, Time Warner, 21st Century Fox, and Viacom. So, rather than having hundreds of independent media companies across the nation, we essentially have just 6. Collectively, the 6 conglomerates thus control almost all of the programming in the United States.
Over the last 50 years, there's been a tremendous consolidation of the mass media. It's gone from over 100 companies to 6 major companies. In the process, these companies have started to overlook major items of news, especially when it respects or has an application to their financial well-being.
Shows like the History Channel, Good Morning America, Colbert Report, Face the Nation, The O'Reilly Factor, Morning Joe, Meet the Press, Fareed Zakaria, Rachel Maddow, and Barbara Walters Special are all financed, produced, and or distributed by the conglomerates. But the crowning jewel for each of the 6 conglomerates is their ownership of one of the 6 major movie studios.
The term major Hollywood movie studio is a very large corporation usually, which makes a lot of motion pictures and employs a great number of people in all disciplines of the movie-making process.
These studios are known as the MPAA Studios, and they are Universal Studios, the Walt Disney Company, Sony Pictures, Warner Brothers, 20th Century Fox, and Paramount Pictures.
There are independent studios. There are very productive studios in North Carolina, for instance. There are studios all over the country, in Arizona and whatnot, where movies are shot. But the MPAA, the big studios, are members of the Motion Picture association, and they are primarily in Hollywood.
These 6 Hollywood-based movie studios produce and or distribute movies watched by about 95% of the viewing public. And most of this audience is comprised of young people.
If you add up that market share, it'll come close to 90% in any given year. And then I suppose the major studio distributors weren't satisfied with just approaching 90%. So almost all of them either bought or created wholly owned subsidiaries that engage in competing with the independents for the lower budget films, things below 20 million. And if you add them all up together, you're getting up to 95% or so each year for the market share of the major studios and their wholly owned subsidiaries.
At the same time, older Americans are treated to the homogenized output of just 6 New York-based news networks. We all know them as CBS, NBC, ABC, CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News. This is where we, the voters, get 95% of our news. Given this state of affairs, the savvy citizen may ask, how has such a small group of corporations been able to dominate the entire mainstream media?
And the answer is the few have control over large quantities of money. They have control over credit. They have control over banking, money issue, as a matter of fact. And we're talking now about the banking fraternity. And if you look on the boards of directors of the great media corporations, you see an interlock with banking institutions. So money is the answer to the question. And a long time ago, they decided that to control the thinking of the population, it was necessary to take over and control the media.
Let's consult some more history.
Technology deeming something to hurt people's brains.
The claims are scientifically implausible.
Donald Trump to now investigate a conspiracy theory about COVID coming from a lab in Wuhan.
This theory needs to be investigated, which is what President Biden is doing.
Hunter Biden's laptop reveals emails.
We shouldn't look at it as anything other than a Russian disinformation operation.
The Hunter Biden laptop material is genuine.
The murder of a police officer, Officer Brian Sicknick, was killed in the line of duty. They beat a Capitol police officer to death.
Officer Sicknick died of natural causes.
The Steele dossier. It may be dirty, but it ain't fake.
Obviously, the Steele dossier is discredited by far, actually.
I mean, this is the lunatic response to what is a very rational, evidence-based, fact-based investigation.
FBI pleads guilty to doctoring email.
What the report shows is something that won't be surprising to people that have spent a lot of time in the federal government.
The report left former officials aghast.
The FBI is exonerated today.
It doesn't vindicate anyone at the FBI who touched this.
They are all absolved of any wrongdoing.
The activities we found here don't vindicate anybody.
The Trump administration cleared peaceful Black Lives Matter protesters so the president could take a photo in front of a church.
We did not find evidence that federal agents used CS gas. The DC police used the CS gas.
Protesters were gassed to clear the way for Trump's photo op.
Demonstrators were pushed out to allow contractors to build a fence, a response to damage done during the 2 previous nights of rioting.
Russians offered a bounty for the killing of U.S. soldiers.
U.S. intel walks back claim Russians put bounties on American troops.
This mountain of evidence that we now have of bounties that Russia paid.
The Biden White House acknowledged there was little evidence.
January 6th committee's investigation into a 7-hour, 37-minute gap, possible cover-up in the records of calls, and it is no coincidence.
The call logs are complete with no missing pages. The gap is explained by use of White House landlines and cell phones.
These are the facts. Let that sink in.
Sponsored by Pfizer. Anderson Cooper 360. Brought to you by Pfizer. ABC News Nightline. Brought to you by by Pfizer, making a difference. Brought to you by Pfizer. CNN Tonight. Brought to you by Pfizer. Early Start. Brought to you by Pfizer. Friday night on Aaron Burnett Out Front. Brought to you by Pfizer. This Week with George Stephanopoulos is brought to you by Pfizer.
This weather report brought to you by Pfizer.
Today's countdown to the royal wedding is brought to you by Pfizer.
And now a CBS Sports Update brought to you by Pfizer.
Meet the Press data download brought to you by Pfizer. This portion of CBS This Morning sponsored by Pfizer.
On how to find the hidden sugars in the American family diet. Sponsored by Pfizer.
Coincidence. I can hear rumblings right now.
Matthew, is it safe where you are?
Pinpoint. Yeah, I think it's relatively safe at the moment. Look, I've got a. Oh,
there's another one.
I've got a flak jacket right here. Let me just get it on.
So Matthew Chance is
live for us in Kyiv, Ukraine. Matthew, we're going to stick with you. Matthew is on a roof in central Kyiv, he's telling us, and just for the first time, just moments ago, you witnessed live on this program explosions. Again, he doesn't know exactly what those explosions are,
but he says it's the first time that he has heard them since he has been in Kyiv. He is trying to put on a flak jacket now to make sure that he is safe. I think we should stick with this just to see what's happening as he is doing this.
Yeah, I think
and we'll get to our other correspondents in a moment. So this is where it appears there are things going on. Now, the president of Vladimir Putin moments ago saying that he was going to send a special military operation to protect Donbass, and then just minutes after that speech aired on state television, Matthew Chance is doing a live shot for us here at 10 o'clock Eastern Time, 5 o'clock a.m. in Ukraine. And there are explosions. Again, not exactly sure what they are, but Matthew Chance is getting into place now, and he's live. Matthew, are you back with us? Can you hear us now? Matthew, just so you know, your flak jacket is covering your microphone. If you can somehow get it out.
Yep, here it is.
There you go. Now, loud and clear, Matthew. Go ahead, please. And please, if you're safe, you need to put on your headgear. Are you good?
Yeah.
Take your time.
Yeah.
Don't rush.
So look, sorry, I think I've broken my microphone as I put on the flak jacket. But look, there you go.
Okay.
I'll have to hold it in front of me like a little mic.
Okay. So Matthew,
look, I mean, over the past.
I want you to stand by. We'll keep Matthew up. Matthew, don't go anywhere because I want to get to Clarissa Ward. She's in Kharkiv, and I understand Clarissa is glass.
Contributing to a major circulation American journal. We do have people who submit pieces to American journals. Do you have any people paid by the CIA who are working for television networks? This, I think, gets into the kind of getting into the details, Mr. Chairman, that I'd like to get into in executive session.
At CBS, we had been contacted by the CIA. As a matter of fact, by the time I became the head of the whole news and public affairs operation in 1954, the ships had been established, and I was told about them and asked if I'd
off of them so they won't be threatening black people any longer. That's all. And when we say this, the press calls us racists in reverse. Don't struggle only within the ground rules that the people you're struggling against has laid down. Why, this is insane. But it shows you how they can do it. They make with skillful manipulating of the press, they're able to make the victim look like a criminal and the criminal look like the victim.
Right now, in New York, we had a couple cases where police grabbed the brother and beat him unmercifully, and then charged him with assaulting them. They use the press to make it look like he's the criminal and they're the victim. This is how they do it. And if you study how they do it here, then you'll know how they do it over here. It's the same game going all the time. And if you and I don't awaken and see what this man is doing to us, then it'll be too late. They may have the gas ovens already built before you realize that they are hot. One of the shrewd ways that they use the press to project us in the eye or image of a criminal, they take statistics. And with the press, they feed these statistics to the public, primarily the white public. Because there are some well-meaning persons in the white public as well as bad-meaning persons in the white public. And whatever the government is going to do, it always wants the public on its side. And whether it's the local government, state government, federal government. So they use the press to create images. And at the local level, they'll create an image by feeding statistics to the press, through the press, showing the high crime rate in the Negro community. And as soon as this high crime rate is emphasized through the press, then people begin to look upon the Negro community as a community of criminals. And then any Negro in the community can be stopped in the street, put your hands up, and they pat you down. You might be a doctor, a lawyer, a preacher, or some other kind of Uncle Tom, and but despite your professional standing, you'll find that you're the same victim as the man who's in the alley. Just because you're black and you live in a black community, which has been projected as a community of criminals. This is done. And once the public accepts this image also, it paves the way for a police state type activity in the Negro community. They can use any kind of brutal method to suppress blacks because they're criminals anyway. And what has given this image? The press. With skillful manipulating of the press, they're able to make the victim look like a criminal, and the criminal look like the victim, look like a criminal, and the criminal look like the victim. With skillful manipulating of the press, they're able to make the victim look like a criminal, and the criminal look like the victim. With skillful manipulating of the press, they're able to make the victim look like a criminal, and the criminal look like the victim. With skillful manipulating of the press, they're able to make the victim look like a criminal, and the criminal look like the victim. With skillful manipulating of the press, they're able to make the victim look like a criminal, and the criminal look like the victim.
Military campaign. Black people tend not to understand propaganda. And the reason why we tend not to understand propaganda is because the propaganda channels, the mediums, the conduits, the radio, the television, the newspaper, we tend to just treat as forms of entertainment. We don't see them as military strategy. When there's a movie depicting black people in a negative image, when there's caricatures in the newspaper making jokes about black people, we tend to just see it as political entertainment. We don't see it as laying the foundation before the storm. That's exactly what they did in Wilmington. You always seek to create a context that allows your military campaign to be acceptable. There's always context. You study Adolf Hitler in Nazi Germany. He had a propaganda campaign that lasted over a year before he began to physically oppress the Jews. He had to make sure that the national mindset had been conditioned to accept the extermination to come. In Wilmington, North Carolina, the same exact thing happened years before Nazi Germany. Through the magazines, through the radio, through word of mouth, through stage play, they created negative images of black people in the minds of white folk in case there were any liberals who would have been against what they were going to do. They were slowly able to reform their opinion by constantly repeating negative information about the target population. See, the one thing about the brain that we got to understand is the creature of repetition. Whoever has the most access to the brain rules the brain. It's all about volume, not quality. The more you tell people that a certain group of people are no good, the more you show images, the more you show sounds, song, poem, dance, projecting negative information about a people, sooner or later, the subconscious begins to get conditioned automatically, because you can't turn off the subconscious to what it sees and what it hears. Sound and image, you cannot stop it except to stay away from it. So sound and image are critical to any propaganda campaign because they help lessen the defenses of anyone who may be against what you're trying to do. It's the same thing happening right now. There is a direct assault on the image of the black man and woman internationally. So when mass incarceration, homicide takes place, nobody cares what's happening to black folk because they've already been conditioned to believe that these people are better off dead anyway. So propaganda is the first stage of military warfare. Right now, we're being set up for another extermination campaign. It's going to be worse than what went on in Wilmington, Tulsa, Charleston, Rosewood. It's going to be worse. Whenever the propaganda gets worse, then you know the extermination is going to be that much worse, because you see how far
they make with skillful manipulating of the press, they're able to make the victim look like a criminal and the criminal look like the victim. They make with skillful manipulating of the press, they're able to make the victim look like a criminal and the criminal look like the victim. They make with skillful manipulating of the press, they're able to make the victim look like a criminal and the criminal look like the victim. They make with skillful manipulating of the press, they're able to make the victim look like a criminal and the criminal look like the victim. They make with skillful manipulating of the press, they're able to make the victim look like a criminal and the criminal look like the victim.
But the one on the floor had a bunch of needles and stuff.